Stephanie Strange. Want to hear something scary?
Hey, my sweet Strangerlings. We're heading into the holidays, and we thought you'd enjoy some nostalgia from something scary for the next few weeks. Longtime viewers may remember these compilations that we used to do, so we are excited to bring them back. Hope you enjoy.
In the early 1920s, a young nurse named Eulalia began working at the Hospital Juarez. She was devoted to her patients and extremely tidy, her uniform perfectly ironed and not a hair out of place. One day, a new doctor arrived named Joaquin. He was charming and immediately took a liking to Eulalia. She ignored his advances, as many of the other nurses warned that he was a ladies' man. But after long shifts and late nights working together, romance found a way, and the two began secretly seeing each other. This was Eulalia's first love, the kind that sweeps you away and engulfs you at the same time. The doctor was called away for a 2-week seminar. He asked Eulalia if she would press all of his clothes and help him pack, complimenting her talent at keeping a wardrobe pristine. She lovingly obliged and sent him on his way. Within days, she felt the pain of missing him, so after months of secrecy, she confided in a fellow nurse. The nurse, alarmed, had some terrible news. Joaquin wasn't at a seminar. Joaquin was getting married and would be on his honeymoon for 2 weeks. He then put in his resignation at Hospital Juarez to work closer to his wife's family. Eulalia felt ill. She had never felt this pain before. A deep melancholy settled in, and when she would work, she frequently made mistakes. Those mistakes got worse and worse until one night, a patient died because she gave them medication they were allergic to. The guilt was unbearable. She saw no way out, and using her medical know-how, ended her own life. The staff found her body lying on top of the hospital bed of the patient she had accidentally killed. She laid there, her uniform crisp white. Such a tragedy. Everyone mourned. A few years later, the now married Dr. Joaquin returned to the hospital. No one spoke a word about Eulalia to him, but everyone knew. He could feel their judgment. This is when strange things began to happen. Whenever the doctor was alone in the hospital, the temperature would drop. He was followed by disembodied whispers, and a few times, medical instruments would drop on the floor around him. Then, in the dead of night, the doctor was called in for an emergency surgery. While performing the surgery, it felt like someone was standing behind him the entire time. The surgery went well, but the patient had lost too much blood. There was almost no chance of survival. Yet, when the doctor returned the next morning, the staff was all abuzz. The patient was sitting up and preening for the nurses. His vitals were perfect. The old man saw the surprise on the doctor's face. Astounded, the doctor said how the staff here are very good at what they do. The man then said,
"Especially the young nurse, the one who stayed with me all night."
The doctor looked confused, as all the female nurses were older. The old man clarified,
"The pretty one, with the perfect uniform, Eulalia. She said her name was Eulalia."
Chills ran down the doctor's spine. Terrified, he left to hide in his office. He locked the door and even braced a chair under the doorknob, then listened at it to see if he could hear anything. Nothing. It was silent. He caught his breath, then felt eyes piercing through his back. As he slowly turned around, there she was, standing there, inches from his face. Eulalia. She looked the same, but her eyes were hollowed out, filled with blackness. He couldn't speak. He went to reach out to her, almost lovingly. She grabbed his hand with one hand, and from behind her back, she pulled out an iron. She pulled him to her and, taking the red-hot iron, slammed it into his face. He screamed and screamed as she kept pressing the iron all over his body. Smoke lifted from it, his skin scorched onto the surface of it. He couldn't escape her grasp, nor the searing heat of the molten metal. This went on for almost an hour. And just outside the door, the entire staff, hearing his cries for help, carried on as if they hadn't heard a peep. To this day, his death in that locked room has never been officially explained. As for the hospital, patients have started calling a presence that appears at night the Ironed Lady, or La Planchada. And since Eulalia's ghostly return, not a single patient has died in the middle of the night, and every morning, the nurses' uniforms are laid out, bright white and pressed to perfection.
Soledad was a well-known herbalist treating many in the community who suffered from illness. Yet despite helping to heal people, there were rumors she had made a deal with the devil himself to keep her youth and her beauty forever. Many grew jealous of Soledad. A myriad of suitors offered their hand in marriage, but she rejected them all. Rich or poor, young or old, not wanting to be someone's prize. One of these suitors was Don Martin de Orcania, the mayor of Cordoba. When Soledad dismissed his proposal, he grew angry and sought revenge. He started another rumor, convincing the townspeople she was indeed a witch. He claimed she had snuck a potion into his drink, causing him to fall in love with her, just so she could refuse and humiliate him. Despite helping so many townspeople with her potions and herbs, they were afraid to speak against the mayor or become victims of the Inquisition themselves. They were driven by fear, supporting the cruel claims that she was a witch. A few still asked for help, but now if they came at all, it was in secret. Soledad became an outcast, which only served to fuel the stories. Children whispered that they had seen her fly over the rooftops, laughing ghoulishly into the night. Men, likely disgruntled suitors, claimed she had tried to sneak them love potions as well. Sadly, Soledad was not surprised when officers turned up at her door and she was taken to San Juan de Urtea prison, where she awaited the punishment for being a witch, being burned to death at the stake. While she was imprisoned, Soledad used her charm to befriend a guard. She had asked him if he could bring her charcoal, and he unwillingly obliged. After all, what harm could it cause? She drew for hours on the walls of her cell, helping to ease the time of passing. As the weeks went by, she created an incredibly detailed drawing of a ship. And by the day of her execution, it was nearly completed. When the guard came to check on her, Soledad asked him to look at her drawing. "Tell me, guard, what is missing from this ship?" He studied the wall for a moment and replied, "Nothing but to navigate to a destination." "Indeed," she replied. The guard looked surprised, but placated her during the final moments before her execution. He watched her step into the drawing and then somehow disappear into it. His jaw dropped as she somehow magically became one with the ship, completing the drawing with a charcoal version of herself. The guard stared in shock as the sketch of Soledad smiled mischievously at him. It must all be true. She was a witch. She had made a deal with the devil. He watched her inhale deeply and blow a strong breath into the sails of the ship, moving the vessel along the wall of her cell. She turned and blew the rest of her magical breath at the guard. He gasped, grabbing his throat, choking on nothing but air. His eyes bulged and his face turned red. His neck bled as he clawed at his throat for breath. He tried to speak to curse the devil-worshipping witch, but no sound came out. He dropped to the floor, dead. Another soul for her master. Soledad breathed more wind into the sails as her ship glided off the walls of the prison and vanished. She was never seen again, nor her cell ever used, as none of the guards dared to set foot inside. Anyone who even went near it felt the cold, icy grip upon their neck and shortness of their breath. To this day, the sound of her ghoulish laughter can be heard echoing throughout the ancient walls of the prison in the darkest hours of the night.
It was Valentine's Day, which meant it was time for the Guatemala City Paper Company's annual employee party. Alejandro had missed last year's party, so when it got late, instead of heading home to his wife and family, he headed to the bar to get himself another drink. There, he saw the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. She also seemed so familiar, but he couldn't remember how or why. "I'm Mariana," she said as her eyes glimmered. Alejandro couldn't believe his luck. He introduced himself, asking if she worked there. "No, a friend invited me," she said as she looked at Alejandro's wedding ring. "They said this was the place to be." She grabbed the drink out of his hand and began drinking it, never breaking eye contact. Alejandro felt his heart beating loudly. She made him feel like a single man again, and he realized that tonight could be the good time he wanted. "Let's get out of here," she murmured. As the two quietly left the party, Alejandro's phone buzzed with a message. He expected a scolding from his wife, Eliza, but instead found a picture of his 10-month-old daughter sleeping. She tuckered herself out, waiting for Papa to come home. Mariana chuckled. Filled with guilt, Alejandro looked up at the gorgeous woman and nodded. He sighed, knowing this would be another night cut short by his responsibilities. Unfazed, Mariana smiled and said, "It's up to you. I'm sure Eliza will take good care of her while we have fun." Alejandro did not remember giving his wife's name, but that wasn't important right now. Mariana was the kind of woman he deserved, he told himself. Just for one night at least. He led her to a deserted area along the riverbanks of the Rio Contreras, and Mariana suggested they go for a swim. She removed her clothes and waded into the water. Alejandro scrambled after her, reaching his hand out to caress her back. When she turned around, the beautiful woman melted away. Her face grew long and horse-like, and her eyes became a piercing red. Her hands were now bloody, razor-sharp hooves. Alejandro knew the legends. For centuries, the children of Central America have heard the haunting stories of La Ciguanaba, a supernatural shapeshifter that roams the streets every night looking for prey. She hunts and punishes unfaithful partners, but he had never believed. Through his terror, he sputtered, "It can't be. You can't be." Her voice grew coarse and growled.
Say my name.
He shuddered, refusing at first to admit it to himself. Then he gave in.
La Ciguanaba,
he cried.
You are the dreaded La Ciguanaba.
The now grotesque nightmare spoke.
I have been waiting a long time to meet you, Alejandro.
He stammered and begged.
Please, I have a wife and a daughter, a baby.
If they truly mattered to you, then you would not be here at my mercy.
La Ciguanaba bellowed and then added,
But do not worry about them. I will care for what you have cast aside.
Alejandro screamed as the shadow of La Ciguanaba fell upon him. That morning, Alejandro's wife, Eliza, was visited by La Ciguanaba. now back in the human form of Mariana. The supernatural shapeshifter hugged Eliza tightly as she caressed her hair and then kissed the baby on the forehead and said, "You were right, my sweet Eliza. He wasn't worthy of you. I'll be here as long as you need me."
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. So, towards the end of the year, I start getting really bad anxiety with seasonal changes, Christmas coming up, and of course the new year and everything that comes with that. So I often need somebody to talk to extra, and therapy has been very helpful for me personally. And it turns out one way to get through negative thoughts is to talk them out. And like I said, going to a professional is the best way to do that. Therapy gives you a place to not only do that, but find solace during those very hard times. So you can get out of your negative thought cycles and find some mental and emotional peace. Therapy helps you stay connected to what you really want while you navigate life, so you can make decisions and move forward with confidence. If you're looking for therapy, give BetterHelp a try. And it's so easy to get started with BetterHelp. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get started and match with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/scary to get 10% off your first month today. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/scary.
Thanks so much for listening. Like and share if this video gave you the chills. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell for notifications. See you next time.
Tammy's Black Friday